He decides because the world has grown quiet around his fists. He stands beneath a dead billboard and watches a star flicker wrong. To find the one hit that matters, he studies the flicker's pulse and sets his feet. He shapes a blow not at stone or flesh, but at the seam between heartbeats. The punch lands on silence and tears open a door too bright to look at, and he steps through as the wind is eaten. Sky splits over Vigilus Prime like a cathedral window shattering. The Nachman gauntlet boils green and violet, a wound in the firmament. Vox altars across the hive choke on static litanies as a human shape rides a falling halo. Pilgrims outside Basilica Ossuary point with blistered fingers and call it a comet. Macro sirens rise from Manufactorum ribs. Out in the void, picket ships reorient their prows, and a slow chorus of targeting cogitators breathes awake. He descends without heat bloom, as if gravity simply agrees. The halo gutters out. The silhouette becomes a man with a plain cape and scuffed gloves, eyes half-lidded against the screaming sky. Wind peels off him in rings, sweeping incense banners flat and fluting the armor plates of a kneeling statue. Hab roofs bow like grass around a stone. Unidentified impactor over Megaspire Callum croaks Vox Primus Helia, fingers skipping across ruinous dials. Ghost words thread through the channel. 10 signals at once. Choir astropaths keening. A child's prayer. The thin brass tick of counting beads at a shrine. On an upper gallery, a sister of battle names the sign under her breath and tightens her gauntlets. He touches down on a transit artery between the spire's ribs. The road does not crack. It accepts him. Foam from ruptured dispensers drifts like snow. People look up through breathing masks and hazard goggles, faces small beneath nimbus lamps. And the first reaction is not fear. It is the relief of a pressure valve turned. A gout of red light blooms beyond the avenue. A demon engine, iron bones, furnace viscera, a horned helm craned forward like a starving beast, hauls itself through a ruptured gate. Word-bearer cultists tug chains from its intakes and chant syllables shaped to wound. Lasfire needles its frame, doing nothing but making it grin. A tanker car lists beneath it, loaded with promethium, trapped against the buckled barrier. Inside, 24 workers pound on the steel with helpless fists. He walks. The demon engine towers, a spiked cathedral put on backwards and filled with hate. It leans, piston limbs driving. A claw sides down, aim lazy with contempt. He raises one hand and catches it. Steel screams. Rivets explode out like a flock of birds. The street trembles. The workers inside the tanker fall silent, listening to the groan of stopped destruction. The cultist notices him and laughs, a cracked sound from a dry throat. Another mortal, the cultist spits, turning charms. Another candle to blow out. The man in the cape looks at the engine's palm, like he's reading the lines. He closes his fingers, almost polite. The claw stops moving. He tilts his head at the furnace eyes. The engine roars and tries to surge, gears biting at air. He is still, and the engine cannot find a place where he is not. Back warns a PDF sergeant. One hand on a boy's collar. The boy does not hear. He's counting the man's breaths. The man lifts his other hand, draws a slow circle with his knuckles, then flicks. The demon engine folds. It does not explode, it collapses inward like wet parchment, edges meeting in the middle. It sighs out a cloud of red steam, and a string of caged souls rattles against its vertebrae, and then goes quiet. The cultists stop chanting, because their lungs forget how. The tanker door bows from inside. He brushes his glove across the hinge, and the metal gives like bread. Workers spill out, stunned and gasping. He guides them with a handlight as the pull of a lazy current. When the last one staggers free, he sets the door down as if returning a borrowed book. A tremor runs along the avenue and up into the sky. Choir astropaths arch in their cradles and bleed from the eyes. Vox Primus Helia tastes copper and ozone. Somewhere 3 levels down, a scavenger's cheap cogitator burns itself praying. The man in the cape flinches, not at the sound or the smoke, but at the pattern his arrival makes in the air. Pilgrims kneel. A woman in a cracked rebreather rises on shaking legs and touches his sleeve. "Angel?" she says. The word is dull and heavy like a coin from a dead empire. He glances at her hand, glove to glove, then up to the sky, where the green wound flexes. On a bastion balcony, a gold-chased rosette catches the light. Inquisitor Lyra Voss stands inside a frame of Vox saints and burning data scrolls, and regards the man through a retinue of robed code priests. Her eyes are winter knives. Her voice to her Vox officer is low and clipped. "Track that resonance. It's not a meteor. It's a vector." A cruiser's hololith blooms in air above the spire's bones. Admiral Cato Varro's features resolve in the static. A face carved by void service and a set jaw, used to giving orders that fit in the space between thunder. "Ground asset, identify," he says, voice thin with trans-hive latency. "This is Fleet Vigil. If you're not a hallucination, I could use a miracle." The man, cape tugging in a chemical draft, looks at the hololith as if at rain. He says nothing. His silence is an answer with edges. The Admiral squints and recalibrates. "Fine," he says. "Miracle 1. Stand by for tasking." A shadow crosses the avenue, bigger than a shuttle, wrong in its angles. A silver tower of Tzeentch yawns in low orbit like a nightmare built of painted equations. Its underside extrudes spindled limbs that skitter across the city's ceiling of smog. The warp rift brightens, greedy and pleased, pulled by the precise bruise left in reality where the man arrived. Cults wake in their hideouts as if to a bell and pour into the streets with knives made of scripture. In the transit artery, a new thread blooms where old threats falter. A cargo maglev, derailed by the earlier shock, starts to slide. Thousands of tons of machine and ore edge toward a drop. The brakes whine and die. A prayer gutter is crushed flat. Votive candles smear. People press against safety rails and chant fragments of fear. He steps to the lip of the platform, plants his heel on the granular grit, and reaches. The train's nose kisses his palm. Metal screams until it finds a note it can hold. The maglev shudders down to stop. The fields hum, wheeling away into a whisper. Dust swirls and settles on his shoulders like grey snow. A ripple of pain runs outward again, invisible and real. A psyker somewhere foams at the mouth. Servo skulls fall out of the air, cogitator cherubs blinking nonsense. The Inquisitor's data priests wail litanies and try to pin the vibration to a symbol. It will not hold. He sets the maglev back into line, slow as a pen returning to its groove. People watch with flat, stunned eyes, as if the idea of rescue is a thing that might crack if handled wrong. One worker has a child in her arms. The child is quiet with attention, one finger in his mouth and the other hand clutching a tin saint. The man in the cape looks at the child for a half-second longer than at the train. A lance of blue-white cuts down from a gun deck in low orbit. Fleet Vigil tags a warp projection and paints it with sunfire. The beam forks when it strikes the tower's skin and burns 3 lines in the clouds. A laugh the color of oil slides down all Vox channels, riding the beam back like a parasite. "Inquisitor," says Admiral Varro on the secure feed. "Your read." Voss watches the man release the train. She is very good at reading. "Not native," she says. "Not ours. Dangerous to keep. Dangerous to kill." "Useful," says Varro. She does not contradict him. "If I order exterminatus, we lose the gauntlet's throat," she says, "because reality lives in trade-offs. We cannot afford to purify this world by fire, so we will attempt a narrower blade." A cult bomber, stitched together from engine scrap and shrine grating, dives low between spires. Its pilot wails a catechism of unmaking. Its belly is fat with promethium charges. PDF autocannons chew at it and miss. The bomber is moving fast and wrong, sliding through lanes that do not exist until it leans into them. It angles for the maglev platform, where a miracle just happened, because the gods always send counterweight. He does not move quickly. He does not need to. He watches the bomber picking its way through impossible geometry, eyes narrowing at the edges of the path it cuts. He breathes in. He breathes out. He makes a fist, and the air around his knuckles seems to notice. When he jabs, the street hears it. The blow does not move through atmosphere so much as choose a line the bomber must cross. The bomber meets the line and becomes debris arranged neatly around an absence. Fuel turns to rain. Flame thinks about starting and decides against it. A wing lands on the teeth of a statue and rings like a bell. The platform goes quiet. Then everyone as one remembers sound. They howl and sob and beat their palms on railings. Some call him angel, some abomination, and most call him with whatever name means help. He feels the second ripple hit. It stacks on the first and runs outward to the choir pits and back into the warp wound overhead. The wound brightens. A small old man in a tenement with a fifth-hand tarot deck vomits black and keeps vomiting. In the cathedral shadow, an unsanctioned witch knows she is about to die and tries to put her cat inside a bread oven at the factorum to keep it safe. The cat runs out streaked with flour and lives. On a sky bridge, a preacher drops his megaphone and stares at his own hands like they're strangers. He looks up at the wound and at the tower that is coming down to meet it, and he knows the shape of what his entering blow did. It was precise, and precision is a kind of invitation. He realizes, without changing his face, that every time he uses that precision here, the invitation will be renewed. Voss steps into the open, her rosette a cold sun on her breast, flanked by Scytterii with augur lances and sisters with burnished helms. Close, she is not all knives. There is a line in one eye that says she has stood and watched too many children buried and did not break. "Identify yourself," she says. Voice neither hostile nor welcoming, but exact. The word is a line drawn on the ground. He looks at her rosette, at the sisters' reliquaries, at the Scytteri's targeting halos. "I'm a hero," he says, the syllables flat, as if he does not expect the label to hold shape here. It lands like a pebble in a well and does not echo. "By whose writ?" asks Voss. He considers, and the silence grows teeth, but he does not flinch from them. "Mine." Varro's hololith leans in. "I'll take that writ," the Admiral says. "For the next 30 minutes, you're under Fleet Vigil's tasking. We have a silver tower burning Atmo and 3 cult uprisings converging on Megaspire Callum. Objective 1, hold the spire's transit arteries. Objective 2, keep my gun deck's firing lanes clear. Objective 3, don't die. How do you feel about catching ships?" He tilts his head, curious. "If they fall," he says. Varro grunts, which is his way of saying good. "Inquisitor Voss, do you object?" "I object in principle to trusting unknowns with reality's hinge," she says. She studies the man's face, the slackness around the eyes that is not sleep. The quiet weight he carries like gravity holds him by choice and makes a decision that costs. In practice, we will use what we have. Servo skulls peel off in a chain, their incense burners smouldering, and sketch a route with pale chem light. The man in the cape follows them like a line on a page. Around him, people rearrange themselves into the idea of a city again. Medici teams sprint to triage points. Priests staple up fresh scrolls that read, "Hold." Squads reform under makeshift banners torn from tarp and scarf. A little boy with a santan counts steps under his breath, anchoring himself on numbers while the sky writes poetry in a language designed to ruin thought. The spire shakes, not from artillery, from the tower's shadow attempting to be more than a shadow. Warp limbs drag reality down by its lintels. In the void, Fleet Vigil's broadsides rake the underside of the impossible and draw screams from a mouth that is also architecture. A gauntlet of Slaneshi raptors swings through the gap between broken pylons and lets drop grenades that taste like memory. People who inhale the dust weep for things that never happened to them. He steps into their flight path. They move fast. They blur where they cross lanes that don't exist. They do not blur around him. They try to strafe. Their guns cycle and will not fire. The bullets consider the ethics of motion and choose stillness. He reaches up and plucks one raptor by the ankle. The raptor screams vile poetry. He places him gently into a wall. The wall appreciates the placement and holds him there forever. The Sisters of Battle advance in a wedge, hymns layered over engine roar. A Canoness-Commander lifts her power sword and salutes the man in warrior language. He nods once, understanding respect when he sees it, and steps aside to give their charge space. They break a cult knot like a hammer, kissing an egg. The invitation in the air is now a bell tolling at a pitch only monsters hear. The silver tower's underside blossoms open and cast down a thing that is not a meteor, not a lander, not anything that has a name here. It is a thinking weapon designed to map hearts and break them on their own edges. It drifts toward the spire like a page being turned. Varro's gunnery officers mark targets with red teeth on their hollows. "That drop payload is priority," says the Admiral. "We miss. The city is a throat cut low." Voss's eyes flick once to the man. "Can you reach it?" she asks, as if asking for a heavy book from a high shelf. He looks up. The thing is far. Distance is a story. He leans, pushes off the street with a foot, as if stepping off a slow riverbank. Air grips him, or he grips air. The city falls away like a map rolled closed. He does not burn. He passes. Little glittering fragments of incendiary confetti flutter past him in slow arcs. He meets the payload in a stratum of atmosphere, too thin to carry smoke. Up close, it is a cage of equations wired to pulp and bone relics, a mathematician's hate turned into architecture. It tries to read him. It finds not man or weapon or saint, but a blank line and a period. It abhors punctuation. He strikes with fingers, not a fist, a short, dismissive correction. The cage convulses and then, as if ashamed of itself, folds into a shape that weighs less than memory and floats down like a leaf. He guides it with a palm so it does not crush the spire's throat when it lands. Below, the invitation's echo becomes a demand. Choir astropaths scream together, a chord that tastes like iron filings on the tongue. Skitarii drop to one knee, augur halos white with snow. Sisters stumble and catch themselves, their hymn skipping a beat. The man's glove tingles numb to the wrist. He knows what that numbness means, because it is the opposite of hunger. He looks at his left glove, flexes, and watches the seam at the webbing between thumb and forefinger glow like a coal, and then go out. The numbness retreats. It leaves a line on the skin beneath the glove that will not vanish when the glove does. He descends in a slow curve and lands on the spire's crown, feet finding a narrow ledge that would not bear a man in heavy armor. The Canoness looks up at him, eyes alight with battle. "Name," she says, ritual making a bridge. "Saitama," he answers, not bothering to see if the syllables fit in this place. They do not. She files them not as words, but as a shape she can aim at, friend or enemy later to be determined. Voss steps onto the crown with him, ignoring the thin wind trying to cut her words away. Every time you act, she says, the warp responds. You are a tuning fork in a cathedral of knives. There is no accusation in it. It is a statement of math. He nods once. I know. Can you choose not to ring? She asks. He considers. He has never needed not to punch. He has only needed to choose where and how. He looks at the spire, at the city, at the eyes below him, and then at the wound in the sky. He looks like someone listening for a song he can match. Sometimes, he says. Varro's voice arrives with a new tension. Inquisitor, my augurs show a vector on the far side of the tower. Something using the breach signature like a signature of its own. This is coordinated. This is not a riot. It is a campaign. Who leads? Voss asks, though some part of her already knows the flavor of the answer. Flag of the Changer, says Varro. A sorcerer ship, with a name I won't repeat. There is a rustle of vox-techs spitting and crossing themselves. They lit engines the second our guest rang the bell. Saitama watches the tower shift form again. A city turned into a puzzle's mouth, swallowing its own streets to spit out armies. He breathes. He hears the numbers. He feels the numb line in his hand. Plan, says the Admiral. The word is simple and costs more than gold. Hold the arteries, Voss says, counting off with black-gloved fingers. Bleed the cults, no heroics. Fleet Vigil fires on the tower's joints when it extrudes limbs. Our acid intercepts high kinetic payloads before they map our hearts. Sisters spearhead countercharges on vox-marked breaches. Skitarii maintain a straight corridor between Spire and Spaceport for evacuation if we must cut throat. No one dies alone. No one dies quietly. The Canoness nods once. Faith holds. Fire follows. Saitama watches their faces. He hears what is not said. If the tower plants a conceptual spine into the spire, Callum will sing itself to death in joy. If the breach widens, ships will come through that are not ships, and no number of fists will matter. He knows the shape of impossible fights, because he has been bored of easy ones for too long. Admiral, Voss says, we'll need a killer's lane for our uninvited night. Done, Varro says. I'll scrape a hole in the sky with broadside prayers. Miracle 1, get ready. Saitama lifts his hand, studies the thin line under the glove again, and closes his fist over it. It is not pain. It is the opposite of hunger. It is the memory of a day when he was not empty. He does not like it. Below, on a mid-level hab balcony, a woman named Amira drags an old man out from under a tangle of conduit and wraps his bleeding head with her scarf. Hold, she tells him, voice flat like the word must be hammered into shape. He stares at the sky and says a name that is not hers. She keeps her hand on his pulse and counts. A Vox officer near the crown tries to stabilize a frequency. The numbers do not line up. He writes them down anyway, in the hope that writing will trick the universe into behaving. The numbers spell a word if you look at them sideways. The word is door. Saitama looks up and decides to ring the bell again. He sweeps the air with the back of his knuckles, not hitting anything but giving the world a direction to accept. The tower leans that way without knowing why. Fleet Vigil's broadsides fill the gap with light. The tower's limb disassembles into pretty thoughts and rain. The third ripple hits. The choir astropaths are prepared this time, their handlers shoving iron nails between their teeth to stop tongues from being bitten through. They scream anyway, and the nails bend. Somewhere, a sanctioned psyker's collar breaks, and his handler shoots him twice and catches him when he falls. In an underhab, a child with a tin saint stops counting, because numbers suddenly seem like machines, and he does not want to put his mouth on metal. He puts his hand on his mother's cheek and waits for feeling to return. Voss's jaw locks. Every use is a tax, she says to herself. Saitama glances at her. He is not good at politics. He is very good at weight. He understands that this is the weight of his method, the cost that is his to carry if he stays. He looks at the wound. He looks at the city. He looks at his hand. Varro's hololith flickers as the tower vomits out countermeasures like seeds. We're not stemming, he says. We're being probed. Inquisitor, if their sorcerer keys a proper lock, we could have an incursion that makes the earlier wars on this planet look like practice drills. He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. We need to cut the hand that writes, Voss says. Not the letters. The Canoness gestures toward the cathedral, where 1,000 candles fight green dawn. Then we write our own letter, she says. We spell, hold. A new sound joins the city's choir. A deep, slow rhythm like a hive heart under a cathedral floor. It is the tower beating its own signal, matching Saitama's ring with a counter-ring. Spire windows rattle in sympathy, then crack. A caryatid loses its face and becomes a different saint. Saitama's cape pulls in this new wind. He steps off the crown. He moves through the air like a thought going straight to its point. The tower extrudes a blade of city into his path. He gives the blade a look like he is not impressed. The blade remembers a time it was not a blade and sags back into staircase and dormitory. Cultists inside fall out with knives and slogans and are shocked to find they are on a staircase. He punches twice, quick as blinking, where the tower's joint bulges like a knuckle under a glove. The sky sounds like a bell without a clapper. The joint buckles. Fleet vigil pushes a sun into it, burning lines through painted sky and grafted monastery. The tower spits a flock of distortion doves. They get halfway to blooming teeth and then cough up sparks and vanish. Confused, they have nothing to chew. On the crown, Voss watches her auspex drown and come up coughing. He's both solution and signal, she says. We ride the contradiction or we drown under it. Varro's eyes are on the void, and the other side is smelling blood. He taps a rune. Fleet Vigil's escorts shift their orbits, herding a new shape that has just translated in. It is not large. It has the arrogance of something that knows size is not the point. A sorcerer's ship, name sealed in hex and henna. Its prow a quill turned to spear. Voss names the inevitable arrival quietly to herself. Azrakar, she says without moving her lips, tasting the syllables of a man who writes wounds. She watches the tower and the breach and the man in the cape, and her mind builds plans and burns them just as fast. On a lower transit level, a PDF platoon pins a cult swarm against a statue. The cult's leader grins and drops a grenade that hatches moths. The moths drink the light and lay silence over the street. The PDF sergeant holds up a glow stick reliquary and chants the names of machine saints in a voice that turns moths to ash. Somewhere a preacher who lost his megaphone finds it again and begins to speak, not into the device, but to one boy who is counting with his eyes closed. Saitama reaches the tower's carven threshold and places his hand on a wall. There's also a question. He tries to understand his palm. It fails. He leans. The wall remembers weight. It depresses, then opens, spilling luminous smoke that smells like cinnamon and old fear. Inside, the geometry hums. Corridors fold like liturgical fans. He steps in. The world notes it. Choir astropaths tear their palms on their own nails. A heretic 5 blocks away stops dead in the middle of a ritual and says, "Oh," like she has just remembered. She left tea on the burner. The wound in the sky tightens, then widens, like a pupil reacting to sudden light. Azrakar's ship leans closer in the void. tasting the flavor his method leaves behind. If a sorcerer smiles in the dark, the shape of that smile is written here. He moves through the tower's throat, where paintings breathe and steps detach and become birds that reattach at different heights. He chooses a straight line to a heart that has none. Statues of saints watch him pass and experience envy for the first time. On the crown, Voss watches her data sages bleed into cloth funnels and keep working. The Canoness touches the hilt of her sword to her forehead and speaks a brief vow that has the weight of iron. Varro squares his shoulders inside his hololith and makes a decision. His second will call Reckless, and his last captain will call the only one. Miracle 1, he says. You are cleared to punch the heart if you find it. Fleet Vigil will pin the spine. Inquisitor Voss will keep the arteries open. If your method kills us, you get to live long enough to feel bad. Saitama walks a corridor that is also a question asked 3 times in different dialects. He listens for the answer and finds only his own footfalls. He has always been very good at knowing where to apply a small amount of pressure. He stops, turns slightly, and taps a pillar that is pretending to be floor. The entire structure makes a sound like a man trying not to cry. He holds up his hand and considers the numb line. He drops the hand and breathes. Then he punches. It is not a big punch. It is a round answer. The tower's heart shivers, and the question is briefly replaced by a period. The structure goes slack. The wound in the sky closes a little and then snarls and opens wider than before. The city screams again. The astropaths convulse. One dies, and his handler closes his eyes with 2 fingers and says his name into the air so it has a place to go. Voss's vox fills with 12 voices. She hears them all and answers too. Varro's ships feel their machine spirits buck, and the gunnery decks sing to them until they stop shivering. Saitama stands in the heart of a dead geometry. He knows the cost now. He knows it will be asked again. He knows he will pay. He steps out of the tower as it sags, its limbs going soft, its mouth unable to keep the shape of words. The structure slides down the side of the spire and comes to rest with a sigh, like a tired animal finally given permission to sleep. Cultists scream insults and promises. Most of them do not believe their own voices. On the crown, Voss lowers her hand very slowly. We bleed every time he saves, she says, but we are not bled out. She looks past the falling tower to where the small, arrogant ship waits in the void, feeling for the rhythm this man makes. And the hand that writes is here. Varro's hololith tightens around his head. Incursion force shifting to vector gamma. Inquisitor, I'm reading formation around the sorcerer ship. They plan to slip a knife along our new line. Then we name the knife, Voss says. She lifts her rosette, and the sisters' eyes turn to her. Orders militant, sanctify the corridors. Skitarii, lay down rails for a straight retreat if needed. Fleet Vigil, do not let that ship speak. And for our asset, Saitama looks from his hand to the city. People are watching him with faces that have decided to survive. The child with the tin saint starts counting again, because numbers now feel like friends. The numb line under the glove is a small price compared to the voices that stopped screaming. He nods without being told. He will ring the bell again, but not yet. He will learn the rhythm of this place, so that when he strikes, the sound will make the wound hesitate instead of sing. The city takes a breath. The tower sags into its own shadow and the sky takes a breath. The city does not. A pilgrim shuttle's port engine coughs flame and dies. It sighs through smog toward the transit stacks like a sickle. Vox nets spike with shouts. The hull peels and throws saints like confetti. Saitama looks up once. He's already moving. He does not punch. He runs, feet skimming air as if each step is a kept promise. The shuttle's nose keens. Inside, a wall of faces meets a wall of gravity. He reaches the prow and places his hands on hot plating. He does not stop it. He convinces it to change its mind. The vector bends. The shuttle's scream shifts into a long groan. He steers it toward a manufactorum roof, ribbed with adamantine like a washboard, and sets it down across the ridges, weight distributed, friction singing. Inside, straps snap and people tumble. They do not break. The hull sheds a wing that slides off the roof and down into oblivion. He holds the fuselage until it decides it is not falling. The ripple comes, thinner this time, as if the bell is listening to be rung and he hummed instead. Choir astropaths sag but do not seize. A servo skull drops a foot and then remembers air. The numb line in his hand pricks, then cools. He files the feeling. He pries the hatch with a knuckle and steps back. Pilgrims spill into smoke, coughing prayers. A sister reaches the roof edge and raises a hand sign. Her squad breaks 3 heartbeats later and forms a corridor between survivors and Medicaid plume. The Canoness-Commander meets Saitama's eye and nods once, language made of metal and faith. Fleet Vigil's hololith flickers above the spire like a moon made of brass. Admiral Varro's voice is a keel. "Clean catch," he says. "Keep the lanes clear. We're carving at the tower's spine." On a lower hab tier, the boy with the tin saint counts in a whisper, eyes shut tight against the sky's grammar. His mother's hand pulls him toward a stairwell. They pass a preacher who asks them both their names and says those names back to them like a rope. Saitama shifts his weight, listening. The city has layers of song. One is Terra, one is duty, one is the wound overhead making itself into a law. He chooses the places to stand where all 3 cross and makes those places a little heavier than they were. Fine. A word-bearer battery drags a Lascanon into a shrine, its barrel dressed with prayer ribbon. It turns to spit blood at the sky. Saitama steps between the beam and its desire. The lust burns on his chest like a thought that cannot find an argument that lands. He takes a breath and the beam diffuses. The cannon's crew blink, hands on controls that suddenly feel like toys. He walks to the weapon and touches the barrel with 2 fingers. The machine spirit decides it is time to sleep. The cultists lift knives and slogans, then drop both as a wedge of sisters crosses the threshold in radiance and iron. He steps aside to let Creed do its work. Controlled collateral. No ringing blow where hands can save. Codex note. Observed. Subject redirects multi-ton descent and high-energy lance with non-striking vector adjustments. Resultant warp resonance, measured at 1/3 prior amplitude within choir cohort. The War Council forms in the spire's nave, under ribs of blackened arch and a ceiling painted with saints holding ships. Hololithic shields float like ponds of light. Data priests set incense on cogitator altars and feed their machine spirit scripture. A reliquary cherub watches Saitama with painted sadness. Admiral Varro anchors the council with a palm on an iron map table. Inquisitor Lyra Voss stands with her rosette at throat and a scarf of ward script wound once around her left wrist. Canoness-Commander Seraphine lays her gauntlets on the table's rim and does not look down. Skitarii adepts hover at the margins like taut bows. Varro begins, because time is a knife. "First, praise where it's due," he says, voice clipped into blocks. "You saved 3,000 in the shuttle, a transit artery, and 4 sub-spires by turning that tower into a tired pile. You kept my guns a corridor." He turns his head to the sisters. "And your wedge made a clean cut. Well done." Voss accepts none of the glow. "We bled for it," she says. Every act he performs rings the wound. The choir is a ledger. She glances at Saitama's gloves, at the way he flexes a hand twice and then lets it be still. Seraphine's eyes are candles. "You tell us the cost," she says. We do not refuse to pay if the price buys souls. Varro looks at Saitama. We need a plan that uses you without making you the bell our enemy rings back at us. Saitama watches the roof saints. I can stop more without hitting them, he says. Push, not punch. Carry, not break. It rings less. Voss studies his face. Your entry method, she says. Describe it. He pulls in a small breath shaped like a decision. I punched a seam, he says. Between beats. I aimed at silence. That's the door I opened. Voss's jaw tightens, not with anger, but with a calculation barely finished when she speaks. Then every precise act you make is a statement to the same seam. The warp listens to exactness like a loophole to love. You are precise. You open it when you are you. Varro swivels till the auger returns. So we build operating rules. Rule 1. You only strike when the alternative is mass death. Rule 2. Favor non-impact interventions. Rule 3. When you must strike, we stack counter-signals, choir dampers, iron, prayer, to blunt resonance. He nods to Voss. You get me those dampers. Already requisitioned, Voss says. Sharia choir in the lower crypt. 30 blanks scattered to thorn the air. The word blanks makes the sister's eyes narrow. Nulls hurt faith like salt hurts wounds. She doesn't flinch from it. Seraphine addresses Saitama with the respect given to a weapon that chooses. We do not look away from who must be cut, she says. But we are guardians, not butchers. We spare the untainted. We escort the weak. We fire the impure. Her voice is iron wrapped in velvet. Saitama nods once. I don't kill people, he says without heat. Monsters, engines, things that eat cities. People I carry. Voss's eyes stay winter. People are sometimes carriers, she says. Taint is a coin that passes hand to hand. Mercy can be murder spread out over days. Varro raises a palm to hold the line. Steel man both sides, he orders. Habit from 100 fleet briefings where the first argument is always wrong. Inquisitor, make the case for mercy. Voss does not blink. We salvage intelligence, she says. We break the chain by isolating the first links, not melting the whole loop. We keep faith with the Emperor's purpose. Humanity's survival, not its tomb. We spare when we can, because Terra feeds the enemy the same way blood does. Varro turns to Seraphine. Canoness, make the case for fire. She does not smile. Corruption propagates faster than wisdom, she says. The enemy wears faces we love. Mercy without discernment is desertion. A clean death here saves 10,000 dirty deaths tomorrow. We wage war against ideas that breed in warmth. Sometimes the only antiseptic is flame. Both women look at Saitama. He meets Seraphine's iron with his quiet. He meets Voss's calculation with a man who knows weight. I'll take the ones who can be carried, he says. If they bite, I'll put them down. Voss nods once. She can work with that. Admiral, she says. Rules stand. Now for the larger blade. She gestures, and auger fog lifts from a hololithic pool to form a ship the size of a song. Its lines are elegant and wrong. Varro's mouth flattens. That's our writer, he says. Sorcerer ship on the far vector. Formation around it like a crown. He's waiting for the next ring. As if obeying cue, Vox bandwidth blooms with a voice that tastes like sugar ground in a mortar of bone. It does not come from a throat. It comes from script. City of Vigilus, it says, somehow kindly. I am Azrakar, Logos-Smith of the Changer. I am here to continue the beautiful pattern your guest has begun. He writes periods. I write questions. Saitama feels the air on the line of numb skin, as if it has grown teeth. He tilts his head, listening not to the voice, but to what the voice does to the room. Candles bow to it, and then, ashamed, stand again. Mute him, Varro orders. Tech priests hiss prayers and twist throttles. The voice does not leave. It chooses not to fill the room any further, which is an obedience worse than defiance. Voss speaks to the hololith. We need a clean kill on that ship before he writes us into our own undoing, she says, and we need to understand his tools. Amagos adjusts his mecha dendrites and lets votive smoke out of a grill. Blackstone signatures, he says, Voxpitch sibilant, arranged in a nested axiom lattice. Null cones project through strata, anchored by pariah filaments. Within the cones, all sympathetic resonance collapses. All verbs lose their courage. Seraphine's face turns to stone at the word pariah. He brings dead air, she says. Blanks that strip the soul's skin. The Magos does not stop. Additionally, he says, mimetic hex bound to civic habit, counting. He points at the scribbled numbers in the margins of a cogitator feed, written by a frightened adept, becomes a siphon. Each enumerated beat tied to a reservoir key to our guest's signature. Voss's eyes move at speed. He is not just countering force, she murmurs. He is spiking the cost. Our asset's restraint feeds his engine. Our asset's strike rings his bell. He's built a paradox cage. Varro rubs a scar on his knuckles. So we break the habit, he says. We stop the city from counting. Across the nave, a clerk looks down at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. Tally marks climb his fingers like vines and stop. Stunned, he closes his fist slowly, ashamed of a prayer he didn't know he was praying. Saitama looks toward the boy with the tin saint in his memory and winces very slightly. He goes still in a way that is not thought but is a decision. I'll make a different sound, he says. They move. Orders ripple down the spire like a wave. Priests take to balconies and pulpits and begin teaching a new litany with no numbers in it. A hum shift that calls the emperor by names that cannot be enumerated. Black armored nulls, Colexus masks like empty faces, are stationed along the corridors like thorn bushes in a path. Skittery lay copper wire in tight braids between altars and doorways to catch Hex as it crawls. Seraphine stands on a stair landing under a painted martyr and raises her voice until it cracks. Breathe with me, she tells a shocked crowd. In, hold, out, hold. She beats the cadence on her cuirass with a gauntlet so they can feel it in their bones. No counting, only holding. The city listens. It is bad at obedience when terrified. It is very good at mimicry. Breaths begin to align. Saitama steps into the open and tastes air sweet with candle soot. A null cone spills down the avenue from a blackness hovering like a broken thought. Within its frame, banners slump, and people lose nouns and then find them again with a shudder. He walks into it. The numb line burns cold, then flares. For the first time since he arrived, his knee softens half an inch under weight. He did not put there. He stops. He explores the feeling without pride. The null is not just quiet. It is subtraction. It subtracts the space in which his conviction connects to the world. He does not punch at it. He steps sideways out of the cone and presses his palm to the boundary as if feeling for a draft at a window. The cone does not have edges, and it does. He walks the curve of a negative until it meets his right hand. He leans and lifts as if peeling canvas. The cone shivers. Its projector, a black pylon hidden inside a faux shrine, buzzes. He kneels and slips his fingers under the shrine's base. He lifts it like a table to straighten a rug. The pylon topples free. The null snaps off like a lantern shuttered. The numb line cools. He breathes once and files that feeling too. He moves along the avenue, not breaking the pylons but unseating them, turning their angles, coaxing their cones to point at each other until they cancel like two silences interfering. Above, Fleet Vigil keeps up a chain of lances that right in light, pinning Azrakar's escort ships into bad orbits. He uses a mix of shove, lift, lean, twist. He refuses to ring the bell. The mimetic hex bites where the city counts to hold itself together. Saitama passes a medici triage and hears a nurse whisper 1, 2, 3 to stave off panic. He taps the tray beside her in a rhythm that matches neither chant nor march. She blinks, then imitates. Patients around her pick up the rhythm on metal rails and bowl rims until the whole ward is a pulse without numbers. Voss listens on Vox and recognizes that moment where a habit rewires. Good, she breathes. We can live in that. Azrakar's voice returns, this time not kind. It smells like parchment smoking. Little human, it says from nowhere and everywhere. You are a hole in the story. Let me make you a sentence. Saitama looks up at a patch of sky that is not the sky and does not bother to talk to it. He walks faster. He turns a corner into an open plaza where a statue of an imperial saint stands pointing a sword at a future that now looks uncertain. The air flexes, a glyph blooms on the statue's blade. The glyph is not an image. It is an instruction. Sightline from the blade to Saitama's sternum fills with a meaning that rips. He steps left and then right, testing. The instruction follows. He does not strike the blade. He reaches up and gently cups the air halfway along the sightline, as if catching rain. The glyph cannot find him. It stutters, confused by a hand on nothing. He closes his fist and the instruction folds on itself and becomes a word with no vowels, then dust. The ripple hits in a hush that each sound then gives it back. The choir moans but does not cease. A child somewhere stops counting on his fingers. The numb line pricks and then holds steady, neither spreading nor retreating. He remembers that he prefers it when the world does not touch his hands this way. War hisses down from above. A flight of Tzeentchian disc riders sprays reality fragments out of their mouths, glitter that cuts prayer. He steps onto a roofline and runs along it, feet beating the rhythm Seraphine taught the city. In, hold, out, hold. He steps into the slipstream of a disc and lays 2 fingers on its rim. The rider shrieks in a voice made of blue smoke and slides sideways into a weather vane. He plucks another out of air by the ankle and deposits him into a hololith spool, whose spirit delights at new work and wraps wires around him like gifts. He reaches the roof's end and skids to a stop, fingers brushing grit into a tiny dune. He listens. The null cones recede where he's turned the pylons. The counting stops in pockets and resumes as breath measures. The mimetic hex pines for a habit it no longer owns. Varro's hololith flares. We're getting varnish off the field, he reports. Good work on those cones. But the writer isn't done. He's drawing teeth. At the spaceport throat, a circle draws itself in the air with chalk that burns. It opens like a mouth, and something like a book flaps out. Pages made of stretched faces and letters that writhe. It tries to eat a thunderhawk in one bite. The gunship's pilot swears with scripture and rams a landing gear into the book's spine. Saitama arrives in one line and slides under the thunderhawk. Hands up, taking the belly's weight so the pilot can think. He breathes and waits for the pilot to kick the throttle. When it screams to life, he lets go. The book tries to close on him. He turns a page. It shrieks and vomits bookmarks shaped like knives. He catches one knife and holds it up to the light. Its edge is verbs. He pinches with thumb and forefinger and takes its tense away. It becomes a ribbon. He ties the ribbon around the book's spine and sets it down gently. It sulks itself into ash. Voss watches through 3 data feeds and 1 pair of tired eyes. He's learning the writer's grammar, she says almost to herself. He's adding gently to a language that only knew cut. Seraphine lays a gauntlet on a pilgrim's head and says a blessing that is mostly permission to breathe. As long as he remembers when not to be gentle, she says. That time is coming. They are both right. Azrakar's ship leans a degree closer on invisible air. Its prow is a quill, its wake a litter of edits. Around it, the escort formation tightens like parentheses. Fleet Vigil's augurs painted red until the screen looks wounded. Varro's lips become a line. We need to box him, he says. He wants to keep writing in our margins. The Magos flicks a mechadendrite at a feed. Recommend counter lattice, he hisses. Iron and him, spaced by prime intervals, lace the city with anti-questions. Voss nods. Do it. She looks to Saitama's return. He is a quiet subtraction crossing the plaza, cape tugged by a wind that blows from a book that is now ash. She calls to him across Vox in a voice that wears fatigue like fine armor. You cannot keep unseating cones forever, she says. He will change the equation. He glances at his hand. The line is there, steady as a drawn breath, numb and not. I know, he says. Azrakar answers for them both. The sky tears open a hand's width above the spire's peak, and a filament drops. It is blacker than black. It is a thread cut from a pariah's hair, braided with blackstone dust and soaked in the ash of burned algorithms. It probes the space where Saitama stands like a blind man finding a face. He steps to one side. It follows. He steps the other way. It follows again. He looks at it as if at a cat deciding whether a lap is allowed. He lifts his hand. The filament kisses the line under his glove. He does not move fast enough. It lays a shallow cut across invisible skin. He does not bleed, but he almost does. The numbness spikes and then distills into a clean, cold ache that reaches into his forearm. His knee softens another half-inch. He plants his foot. Voss hears the change in his breath. Report, she snaps. He flexes his fingers once. It found me, he says. Conceptual toxin, the Magos chatters. Anti-energy bound in the negative spaces of action. It seeks the thing you define yourself by and subtracts it. Seraphine's face goes very still. He cuts at your calling, she says. He thinks if he steals your word, he steals you. Saitama looks at his hand and sees a life spent seeking a strike that mattered. He has called himself a hero because there was nothing else to call what he did. He has been empty with winning for so long that the only thing left that felt like something was the idea of a good fight. The filament tries those doors and finds them unlocked. He closes his fist slowly, like a man closing a book he cares about. I'm more than a punch, he says. It is flat. It is true. The filament hisses like a kettle left on the hob and retreats an inch. The city does not see the cut. The city sees him straighten and step forward onto the spire's edge again. He is not a statue. He is a person who decided. Power scaling. Interlude. 1. Azrakar's blackstone axiom lattice projects null cones that collapse sympathetic resonance. Within them, Saitama's precision cannot find purchase because the world refuses to agree. Pariah filaments, dead zones braided with anti-energy, seek and scar the conceptual hinge of his action, turning his defining verb into a subtractive wound. Mimetic hex layers key onto civic habits like counting, converting the population's coping into fuel for the lattice key to his signature. The more he restrains by gentle adjustments, the more energy is tithed into Azrakar's reservoir. The more he strikes, the louder the bell, inviting heavier warp ingress. He must thread a narrow corridor between ringing and siphon, or break the lattice at its writer. Varro does not waste the moment. We're done reacting, he says. Voss, can you trace his lattice to a keystone? Her data sages cough bleeding prayers and raise a tremoring hand. 3 keystones, she says, all moving. He's not a fool. Seraphine wipes ash from the cheek of a child and says into her vox without looking away. Pick the one we can reach. Send us. Send him. Voss nods once. Vector Delta, Underhive Conduit 3. Pylon density high, nulls thick. If we take it, the lattice drops to half strength. Varro's mouth twitches but does not smile. You're up, he says. Orders militant, take the throat. Miracle 1, keep the roof on. Saitama does not answer aloud. He steps off the spire in a quiet arc and comes down in a storm of prayer strips. The underhive is a throat. It breathes rot and incense. The nulls pooled here smell like a cellar after the house above has burned down. The pylon keystone is a flower of obsidian with the veins of dead gold. Sisters go in first, shields high, hymns low. Nulls rasp the edges of their song. They sing anyway. Saitama follows them as a shadow that helps carry weight. Azrakar shows teeth through a speaker made of 3 broken Vox units and a choir boy's throat. Come take the thorn, he says. He sets the pylon flower's angle with 3 finger presses on the air. It will not ring if unseated. It will ring if struck. He slides 2 fingertips under a petal and lifts. The petal resists with the stubbornness of a sin that has been justified so long it has become a personality. He does not argue. He levers, slow and merciless as dawn. The petal gives. The null field thins. Sisters lunge. A Tzeentchian rubric marine steps into the room with a gait like a memory trapped in amber and raises a bolter inscribed with algebra. Seraphine's sword sings. She writes his end on his armor and he collapses into order and dust. A cultist runs at Saitama with a book for a knife. He takes the book and turns it sideways, and it becomes a book again. The cultist kneels, stunned by a world where a book does not cut, and weeps for a teacher he cannot remember. He lifts the pylon's core out of its nest and sets it gently on a bed of cables. The null drops by another measure. The numb line cools to a steady, honest ache. Azrakar does not sulk. He shifts the lattice and drops 2 cones into angles Saitama cannot reach without crossing a pariah filament. He tests the filament with a twig of rebar as if poking a snake. The twig browns and flakes. He breathes, admits a problem, and retraces. Above, Fleet Vigil throws a macro lance into empty lore. Azrakar's escorts disassemble into origami shapes that should not fly and do. Varro's bridge lights flicker and stay on by the stubborn joy of a second engineer who loves his ship more than his life. In the nave, Voss holds 2 plans in her mind and lets one die so the other can live. Saitama carries the pylon core up a stair while sisters form a corridor of shields. He gets to the landing and stops, listening. The city breathes with him. In, hold, out, hold. He plants the core on the catwalk edge and tilts it. Its cone meets another cone, and the 2 silences argue themselves out of existence. The air tastes like iron filings and rain. Azrakar speaks again, voice thinner like ink left open. You improvise, he says. That is almost interesting. Saitama looks up and does not answer. The filament tries for his hand again. He holds his hand in the hollow of a shield brother's wake and lets it pass into steel. The filament kisses iron and regresses in confusion. He flicks it away with a knuckle. He does not smile. On the spire, the boy with the tin saint tries to count and fails and then laughs because breathing is easier. His mother keeps her hand on his chest. A preacher tells them both their names again and then gives them a 3rd name to share. Hold. Seraphine's visor is up, eyes on fire with discipline. We have the throat, she says over Vox. Secondary targets collapsing. Voss's voice is calm water over serrated stone. Good. Keep moving. We'll cut the 2nd keystone with Fleet Vigil. The 3rd will starve. Varro shifts a destroyer by 1/10 of a degree and opens a lane that did not exist when the sentence began. We'll make the stars help, he says to his navigator. The navigator shows teeth. They are slow friends, she says. Saitama steps back into the light above the underhive. The city looks up from its wounds and finds itself still here. He stands on a parapet and listens to 100,000 breath cadences trying to match a new song. He nods once, as if to a plan that went right enough. Azrakar lets go of kindness entirely. The sky above the spire puckers. A sigil draws itself backward, unwriting as it appears. It resolves into a door with no frame and then cracks. Through the crack, there is not void. There is a library where each book is a person who forgot their own name. It begins to pull. He is already there. He leans over the parapet and puts his palm near the crack. He does not touch it. He breathes at it. In, hold, out, hold. The crack resists being asked to hold. He asks again. It holds. He waits until Fleet Vigil can stitch light across it like sutures. It closes with a nasty whisper. The numb line in his hand stops being a line and becomes a map. He does not need to look to know what it draws, ways he could be unmade without bruise or bone. He does not let the map set his steps. He has walked farther on less. Voss meets him at the parapet, wind clawing her scarf. He will stop playing soon, she says. The duel is coming. He looks at her rosette. I'll go, he says simply. Not yet, she says, and the words cost her. Not until we frame him on our terms. We cut 2 keystones. He is weaker now, but not weak. We will bleed you for a victory if we go now, and we cannot afford your blood. I don't bleed, he says, more reflex than brag. You do, she says, voice a knife that hurts because it is used right. I can hear it. The choir hears it. That numbness is your blood. He looks at his glove and does not argue. He looks at the city and does not leave. Pharaoh's hololith blurs and tightens. We're ready to box, he says. We push him between a broadside sun and a null net. On your mark, Inquisitor. Voss takes a breath and does not count. Mark, she says. In space, the battle shifts into geometry. Azrakar's escorts tuck in like swans in a painting, and then are forced out by lances that write borders. Fleet Vigil rolls and rakes in a pattern that makes no sense until the 3rd pass, and by then the box is closed. The sorcerer's ship slides along the inside of a wall made of faith, iron, and navigation. Azrakar opens 1,000 small doors that lead nowhere and laughs in a way that tastes like paper mold. The laugh cuts off when a grey night strike cruiser drops into the box without flares or fanfare. Its hull a reliquary, its machine spirit a prayer that can carry men into the hearts of bad ideas and bring them home again. Voss does not let triumph show. She knows what kind of war she is asking. On the spire, Seraphine raises her sword and speaks into the city. Hold, she says. Now we take the head. Saitama places his hands on the parapet and leans into the wind. He sees the duel the way a boxer sees the next 3 exchanges. He could go now and punch until the filament finds a deeper door. Or he could wait and hit once when the writer is reading a different sentence. He waits. Azrakar, feeling the box, drops something into the city he had saved like a last treat. It is a hymn made of hunger, key to men who carry guns. PDF squads across 3 levels straighten and turn their barrels inward, minds suddenly anesthetized to the difference between friend and thought. Fingers tighten on triggers. Saitama is in the middle of them before the first gun can cough. He walks through a corridor of muzzles and touches wrists, elbows, shoulders. He is gentle. He does not leave bruises. He leaves the memory of a hand on skin and a sense that something different should be true. Men who are about to kill the people they sleep beside blink and put their guns on the floor and cry without sound because that was too close to another world. He looks up at the wound and knows the little victory is worth the tax he'll pay later. The choir moans like a tired ocean. The numb line warms, then cools. He breathes and holds. Voss turns to the Grey Knight's hololith with a respect that shades toward fear. "Brother Captain," she says, "we have a writer in a box. We need his quill snapped and his tongue nailed to his palate." The hololith answers with a voice like steel under velvet. "We will sanctify the vector," it says. "But this one reaches not only through warp but through idea. Your champion must meet him where idea touches flesh." Saitama's hand tightens on stone. He does not speak. He does not need to. Everyone hears the shape of the next hour. Varro lays his palm on the map table, as if in prayer to the idea of planning itself. "Then we bring him to heel," he says. "And we make this a story that ends with us alive." The wind from the wound picks up and drops. It becomes an inhalation before speech. The city leans in. The bell the enemy wants to ring is quiet, not because there is no hammer, but because a man with a plain cape and a thin, numb line on his hand is choosing the moments when sound becomes cost and when it becomes salvation. Above them, the box closes. The Grey Knight's cruiser opens its launch bays like a chapel door. A dozen silver storms take wing, purity seals snapping like flags. Fleet Vigil's lances draw straight lines to guide them. Azrakar smiles with his hands, twitching filaments like a puppeteer. He spins a final null cone around himself like a cloak. He writes a joke in dead languages on the hull of the nearest escort, and then erases it to keep the laugh for later. He prims his voice for one more speech and swallows it when Saitama looks up, not at him, but at the space around him, counting not with numbers, but with rhythm. The War Council ends not with a dismissal, but with motion. Seraphine takes her wedge into the lower crypt to hold a stair, where everything will try to come up. Voss walks toward the choir pits, with a handful of iron nails and a prayer folded so small it could hide in a tear. Varro makes the sky into a corridor. Saitama walks toward a roof he has not stood on yet and breathes. In, hold, out, hold. The city follows. The wound listens. The writer waits with a quill made of lac. Saitama steps into the place where the duel will begin and keeps his hands open. He can feel the cost waiting like a coin on his tongue. He will pay. He will choose when. The tactical map blooms in the nave like a flower made of iron and light. Fleet trajectories knit around a box, drawn in lances. 3 keystone nodes blink red, then 2 fade to amber. The underhive throat is theirs. 1 remains, drifting behind hull and hex. Voss points with 2 fingers, blunt as a blade. Objective: isolate Azrakar's writing hand. Standard counters fail because force feeds his lattice and restraint pays his tithe. We must bind his tongue in 3 places: field null, faith chorus, anchor strike. She looks at Saitama. That last is you. Varro's voice rides in on the sting of ozone. Fleet Vigil maintains the box. Grey Knights will breach on our mark. If the writer slips, he eats the ship. We hold him at knife edge. He taps the hololith. Escort ships ripple against invisible walls. Time is short. The longer we write with light, the more he reads. Seraphine traces a cross on her cuirass with 2 fingers of ash. Orders militant will hold the stair at St. Vestra's gate. We will sing until our tongues crack. She turns to Saitama. When you strike, strike true. The Margos drones a litany of mechanics. Blackstone lattice co-ops sympathetic actuation. Macro lances warp breathe. Null cones invert verbs. Pariah filaments cut identity. Recommend. Anchor him in a sanctified circle, void of count habit, seeded with iron spirals. Voss looks at Saitama's hands. You will be tempted, she says, stripped of ceremony. He has read you. Do not bargain where the price is named later. Her eyes soften by a hair. We will hold your edges while you choose a middle. Saitama nods. He stands as if set in a doorway made to his measurements. He listens to the city breathe his cadence back. In, hold, out, hold. He files a sound like a friend. The roof selected is spare and wide, a transit pad walled by parapets and prayer pins. The wind scrapes it clean. Skitari lay iron spirals like constellations and fix them with nails that remember monasteries. Sisters hang banners with words from before numbers. Nulls take positions that make the air ache. An astropath choir hums through bitten nails. He steps onto the center point. A circle of chalk and blood traces his boots. He lifts his chin and faces the hole in the sky. He does not call. He lets himself be found. Azrakar arrives as punctuation, not as a shape. First a pause where wind forgets it moves. Then a line that cuts light into drafts. Then a man the color of a bruise steps out of a thought. Robes stitched with alphabets that never settled on meanings. Eyes like ink poured too fast. He does not quite stand where his feet are. "Little hole," he says with a smile that likes itself. "Your entry was elegant. You struck silence itself. Do you know how rare that is?" He moves his fingers and air edits itself. "Come with me. I will make you fights that read back. You will not be alone inside your verb." Saitama looks at him without interest that shows. "No," he says. Azrakar laughs kindly, as if at a shy child. "You are starving and prideful. Famine makes saints cruel. It makes heroes empty. Let me feed you and call your emptiness meaning." Saitama's face has the stillness of tired men. "No," he says again. Azrakar lets the smile slip like a mask onto a shelf. He lifts his hand. Filaments fall like hair in negative light. They taste the air around Saitama's fist and find that little numb line like a recipe card. They hum approval. The first filament kisses his glove and opens a shallow cut in a place that only words can bleed. He feels heat like cold and pressure like doubt. He holds his breath on the hold and watches the filaments curve. "Vox, I have contact," Voss says, eyes wrapped on him. "Maintain chorus. Do not count." Her voice turns. "Asset. Report status." "Cut," he says. "Light." Azrakar's robes flare like pages fluttering. "Your world made you a joke. I make you a story." He flicks a finger and a null cone rolls over the roof like a night poured out of a jar. The iron spirals drink and spit it back as sparks. The null snarls and tries again. Saitama steps sideways into a gap between two negatives and finds a patch of air that still wants him. He moves through it. He does not strike. He angles a hand and lets a filament follow him past the circle's edge. It brushes a banner inscribed with a name from before math and recoils like a burned animal. Azrakar's eyes sharpen. "Clever," he says, "and there is no kindness now. Fleet." Vigil's lances graze the box walls outside atmosphere, painting lines that bend the conversation. Grey knights hold in intraspace like beads on a wire, waiting for a door to be a door and not a joke. Azrakar draws a sigil in the air, and it tries to be true. Saitama cups a hand under it and lets it become heavy. It falls into his palm and lies still like a bird convinced of sleep. He flips it over and the underside is teeth. He places it on the iron and the teeth gnaw themselves blunt. The ripple that follows arrives as a whisper, not a blow. Choirs shiver and recover. "Your precision is the key and the lock," Azrakar says. He steps closer without crossing distance. "You long for the punch that matters. I will give you an endless cathedral of moments that ache with almost. You will never be bored again. And that is my gift. Boredom is my problem," Saitama says. "Not yours. Everything is mine," Azrakar replies, and threads 3 filaments at once. They spear for his fist, his knee, his eye. He turns his head and lets the eye-shot card past his temple, cold as an unkind word. He lifts his knee and the cut rakes along his shin. where the skin remembers other training. He cannot let the fist be taken. He raises his left hand. The filament finds the line again. It opens the cut deep. He staggers as if a friend has said his name like a curse. He plants his foot and breathes a hold hard enough to make his jaw pop. The null cone surges. The iron spirals sing. Seraphine's hymn fractures into harmonics that coat the air like lacquer. Nulls rasp and pull pain away into their emptiness. Voss closes her eyes and touches iron nails to her tongue, and tastes battery acid and temple dust, and refuses to make a face. The city hums a breath with no numbers. Fleet Vigil keeps the box from closing on their throats. Azrakar flicks a wrist and the roof remembers when it was a script. Letters crawl like ants. They write the word fall under Saitama's feet. He looks down at the word and decides not to respect it. He steps off the edge and onto air that obeys him, not print. He climbs 3 paces up a wind that doesn't exist and then drops back into the circle. The sorcerer nods once, satisfied to have found a place where he cannot move his piece that way. "Let us be honest," he says, suddenly gentle again, the softness of sand that grinds enamel. "Your world bored you. It fed your hunger and took your joy. I can make you hunger that is joy." Saitama thinks about a supermarket aisle and a hero who ate crab until he changed shape, and a fight that ended in one punch and in silence. He thinks about the boy counting with a tin saint and a woman who kept her hand on her throat until it learned to stay open. He breathes. "No," he says softer, not to him but to the urge in his own bones. Azrakar's face goes flat. He pulls his hand to write the killing line. Saitama moves first. He steps through the slice of null where the iron spirals cancelled each other to a corner. He plants his heel on chalk and blood. He opens his palm, not a punch, and pulls. The filaments kink. For a heartbeat they obey a law they did not write. They draw inward. Azrakar's cloak tightens. He makes the mistake polite men make when surprised. He pauses to reassess. Saitama does not. He throws one punch. It is not a grand arc. It is an answer with a period that refuses the next sentence. It lands on Azrakar's center line where thought touches body. The sorcerer's ribs forget the note they were humming. His lattice hiccups. The null cones buckle. The box in space hums through Fleet Vigil's hulls in joy. The blow rings. The wound in the sky brightens into a sound the city can taste. Choirs bite through iron nails and scream. In the nave, 3 astropaths die and their handlers say all their names at once. In low habs, old men fall to their knees without deciding how. The boy with the tin saint is spared. His mother holds his chest and holds and the breath goes in and out and he keeps it. Azrakar folds like a book slammed shut on a hand. He spits ink. He backsteps through a page where a door was drawn and comes out on the roof's rim, cloak hissing. Filaments lash. They find the line in Saitama's hand and wrap it like wire wraps a branch to shape a bonsai. He cannot unclench his fist for one heartbeat. In that heartbeat, Azrakar speaks a word that tastes like obligations. "Champion," he says into the cut. Saitama's mouth fills with copper. His vision edges grey like winter paper. The word settles where pride lives. He refuses it. He refuses not with anger, but with contempt. He lets his hand close around the filament and the filament thinks it has him, and then realizes it is inside a grip that has held meteors and mercy alike. He twists his wrist a fraction. The filament knots itself and severs. It draws back howling, even though it has no voice. Azrakar staggers. He bares teeth that are not teeth. "Blanks," he hisses. "Bring me their knight." Down in the nave, Null step forward. They do not run. They stand and let their emptiness make a road. The sister's hymn slows and deepens so it can carry past them like light bent around black. The city hums lower. Men in the underhive bleed from the nose and keep laying wire. Women in triage wipe blood from mouths and keep counting without numbers. Azrakar throws his last, best shape. He writes a circle in the air of broken promises and fills it with a memory Saitama did not mean to keep. A fight that could have mattered if the other man had lasted. A face carried only as the absence of an equal. The circle animates that lack and gives it a mouth to say, finally. Temptation comes at him in the form of a promise that looks like a friend. It steps with gravity. It carries the weight of years he spent asking walls to talk back. It looks like the only thing he ever asked that wasn't a shopping list. He watches it come. He is not a clever man, but he knows the difference between hunger and a hand that would lead him by the nose. He drops his chin and breathes. In, hold, out, hold. The circle stutters on the hold. Azrakar snarls and lobs a weight of hex straight into the choir pits. Voss sees it and cannot intercept with body. She steps into the path with words like iron and names like ladders. The hex climbs her and finds no rung. It slides off, angry to be denied. Saitama moves. He does not aim at Azrakar's face, or his chest, or the place where shoulders decide to bear burdens. He aims at a notch behind the left shoulder, where breath catches when a man is about to say I. He throws a jab that is more correction than assault. It lands and draws a line through the lattice that says, stop. Azrakar stops and starts over, which is the only honest anger left to him. The roof shakes. Grey Knight's teleport flares paint the air with Latin that wants to be heat and manages both. A silver figure steps through a seam with a warded halberd, eyes behind a mask, seeing what minds do to themselves. He does not join the fight. He recites a prayer that hollows the roof into a room where lies have to ask permission. Sacred intervention does not save. It invites. It reminds. Saitama's cut flares again, the numb line becoming a spike up his arm into his shoulder, and then settling at the base of his neck like a brand pressed in and pulled away too soon. He almost drops his hand. He keeps it up because that is what he does. Azrakar makes one last pitch with a voice that has learned to hate love. You are wasting yourself, he says low. Let me waste you better. Saitama shakes his head once. No. He steps through the iron spirals and into the place where the nulls overlap. He does it on purpose. The world subtracts him down to bones of intent. He lets everything that is habit fall off. He keeps only this, a man helping a city because he can. He lifts his hand and throws one more punch. It is small. It is the size of a knuckle. It lands on the sentence. Azrakar is trying to write to himself. It breaks the quill, not the hand. The sorcerer's ship in orbit hiccups. The lattice breaks into commas. The box in space closes a fraction more. Fleet Vigil's lances cut a line in reality that leads out of this paragraph and into the margin. Azrakar goes to one knee. He is not beaten. He is wound. He flings a filament not at Saitama but at Voss, because spite is a theology. The Grey Knight's halberd moves a half inch. The filament knots around it and shortens into a nasty memory. Voss breathes once and does not show her relief. Azrakar looks up and sees a future he does not like. He writes himself an exit. It looks like a smudge on thought. He steps into it. He leaves his anger in the air and his smell on the word why. Saitama lowers his hand very slowly. He watches the smudge close. He breathes. The city breathes. Choirs sob. The numb line in his hand becomes a plateau of ache. It will not leave. Codex note. Duel witnessed. Tzeentch, sorcerer, employing Blackstone null axiom lattice and pariah filaments, inflicted a conceptual laceration on subject, reducing action coupling efficiency by measurable degrees. Decisive strikes targeting intent form rather than body-disrupted lattice anchoring. Aftermath arrives like rain after a chemical fire. It is good, and it still stings. Sisters pick the wounded off the roof and down stairwells. Nulls sit with their backs against the wall and stare at nothing, because that is their job. Skitari check wires with thumbs black with old grease. Priests gather iron nails from floors sticky with blood and prayer. The grey knight steps back into the seam and leaves whole scent, and a note on the air that says, "Not done." Voss steps to Saitama's side. She does not touch him. "The cut is not for hands. He marked you," she says softly. "He tried," Saitama says. He flexes his fingers and feels the spike settle into a line again. "I'm fine. You're bleeding in a way that doesn't leave puddles," she says. "We can't bandage this. We can only manage it." He looks out at the city. Light stutters in windows, but keeps showing. The boy with the tin saint holds it above his head like a sun and laughs, because laughing is what he has now instead of counting. A thunderhawk limps past with one gear screaming and the pilot singing through clenched teeth so the ship knows it is loved. Varro's hololith ripples. "We cracked his quill," he says. "He slipped anyway. We can hunt the ship as it runs, but the scent fades even as I talk." He looks at Saitama. "You bought us this day, and we bought you a problem." Voss's chin lifts. Duty sets her face. "The throne must see you," she says. "Not as a prisoner and not as a petitioner. As a weapon and as a wound. If you stay unsanctioned, every order will hunt you or claim you until the claim is a war. If you go, there is a chance we can write you into this story without killing the city." Seraphine joins them. Armor spattered with rust and ash and the weird glitter of broken sigils. Her voice has the gentle weight of a cathedral door closing. "Pilgrimage," she says. "Escort. Medici for the wound no medici can see. Debate on the road. Sanction where mercy lives." Saitama rolls his shoulder once, testing the cut like a man learning where not to lift with his back. He looks at the wound in the sky, now only a bruise and a doctrine. He looks at the iron spirals, scuffed and faithful. He looks at the people who did not die today, and the spaces where people did, and the holes those spaces make. "I'll go," he says. Voss nods. "We leave when the lanes are held. Fleet Vigil will spare an escort. The sisters will walk you where ships can't. The nulls will ride even though they hate ships and ships hate them." Her voice lowers. "You will be tempted again. This was a taste. The road to the throne is paved in offers." He shrugs a little. The cape moves like a sigh. "I'll say no again." Seraphine studies his face. "Saying no is a muscle," she says. "We will keep it strong." Azrakar does not leave them peace. His voice scratches once on every wall, like chalk a child hid. "Enjoy your pilgrimage," it says. "Too sweet to be anything but poisonous. Your hole has found its cathedral. The questions will be waiting." Fleet Vigil coasts to a new orbit, with the slow majesty of tired giants. The grey night cruiser bows and slides away to chase a scent only it can smell. In the nave, the astropaths' bodies are washed and named, and their names are placed in mouths that can carry them into the next room of this world's longhouse. Nulls sleep without dreams and call that rest. Skitari reconsecrate their augurs. Medicae tally bandage and morphia and find they have enough barely, which is also called a miracle. Saitama walks the edges of the roof where the duel was. He touches a scuffed iron spiral with the back of a knuckle. It hums like a well still tasting the bucket's rope. He lets the hum climb his arm into the line and sit there. It hurts in an honest way. The boy with the tin saint finds a piece of chalk. He starts to draw a circle. His mother takes his hand gently and draws a spiral instead. He laughs because spirals feel like dancing. A preacher watches them and revises his next sermon. Varro's voice comes one more time, low. "We'll cut you a lane to the stars," he says. "Then you'll have to find your feet on a road men call by proper names. Watch the middle. The ends will try to own you." "I'll walk," Saitama says. Voss gathers her retinue with a gesture. "We move in 1 hour," she orders. "No trophies, no speeches. Load iron, water, bread, and the one relic we can carry without breaking. And bring me 30 thorns," she adds, meaning blanks, meaning pain, meaning safety. We are going to the man on the throne. Seraphine takes her sisters into the crypts to pray and polish without vanity. She asks Saint Vestra for a sign and receives none. She accepts the silence as assent. Saitama stands alone for the first time since he stepped through his own door. He looks at his fist. He opens it. He closes it. The cut holds steady, not worse, not gone. He breathes. In. Hold. Out. Hold. The sky above Vigilus Prime is a bruise a city learns to live under. The wind tastes like solder and candle smoke and iron and a little blood. Somewhere a coin drops and does not spin, because a boy's fingers are keeping it flat and safe. He heads for the stair, not like a hero descending a stage, but like a man taking the next step, because there is a next step, and taking steps is what he has. The pilgrimage assembles in the shadow of the spire. 30 blanks in black stand silent as doors. Sisters line in 2 files, white purity seals fluttering on pauldrons. Skitari adjust the tuning of augur lances until the air hums at a pitch that makes teeth ache. Voss arrives on foot, rosette hidden under a drab cloak, ward scarf wrapped around her left wrist, a blade at her hip that has never been drawn in vanity. Varro's escort ships lower like patient hawks to kiss atmosphere. Their machine spirits splay feathers of blue. Hollows shiver with plotted corridors, and the places those corridors do not go. The grey night cruiser sends one more code. It translates as, "We will meet you farther in, where maps burn." Saitama takes his place beneath the banner that reads, "Hold," with the hand of a soldier drafted out of a factory and still not sure he deserves to belong in a line. He does not carry a weapon. He carries his hand like a promise. Voss steps to him. "Rules for the road," she says. "No striking, unless the price of not striking is a world. No bargains. If the Emperor speaks, listen with both ears and neither pride. If I say run, you run. If the Canoness says kneel, you kneel. If the blank says stop, stop." She lifts her chin. "If you choose a path I cannot follow, I will not lie to you about what that means." He nods. "If you choose a path I cannot follow," he replies, "I will not lie about what that means for me." They regard each other without sentiment. They have saved the same city for one day, and both know that means very little to the next. The convoy moves. They go by stair first, through crypt and choir, under frescoes of amaranth saints and banners that saw wars older than the idea of him. Nulls set the cadence with their silence. Sisters chant low to keep the flesh honest. Saitama walks in the middle and lets the line of ache be a metronome he does not permit to speed up. Emergence to the spaceport is under a sky patched and held with light. Dock crews line railings and watch them pass. Some make the sign of the Aquila. Some raise 2 fingers in the old sign that means, "Live and help me live." One boy holds up a tin saint and a spiral he has drawn on the floor. Saitama nods to it. Voss touches a bulkhead as they board and murmurs a prayer about machines and men remembering their jobs. The ship hums back with pride. They ride the lift in a cylinder of grit and old paint. The door opens with a sigh like a long debt half paid. Straps click. Benches take weight. Nulls fold into their empty. Sisters cross themselves. Skitari's optics pin and unpin. Voss pulls the scarf tighter and closes her eyes, not to shut anything out, but to locate the room inside her, where she keeps fear until it is useful. Saitama sits with his knees apart, elbows on thighs, hands loose. He watches the floor shake as engines wake. He breathes in, hold, out, hold. Azrakar watches them rise through a lens made of dislike and curiosity. He writes a promise on his own wall, to meet them between here and there with a mirror that shows the man his face, not the one he thinks he has. In the void, Fleet Vigil's escorts open a lane to the black that is not empty, but is honest about wanting to be. The convoy slips into it like a blade through cloth. The wound in the sky is behind them. Ahead is the long road to a chair made of a man and a machine that burns time to oil. He looks at his hand one more time and lets it be. The cut is a line. It will be a scar. It will remind and not define. He decides that the punch he threw that mattered may not be the last one. He decides not to decide what that means. The ship angles its nose toward a star where a light has burned too long and still burns. The city below finds itself not dead and calls that miracle enough for tonight. The boy with the tin saint sleeps with the spiral chalked around his bed. The convoy passes through a layer of space that hums like tension. Every machine spirit aboard lifts its head to scent the wind of things with wills. Nulls flinch without moving. Sisters' prayers fall into a lower register as if speaking under a ceiling. Voss opens her eyes and knows the next act has already started writing itself. Saitama closes his and does not sleep. He listens to the ship breathe around him and matches it. The cut sits with him like a companion who does not talk much and will not leave. At the edge of the system, a shadow cinches itself like a belt around their path. It is slender and familiar and shaped with malice worn smooth by practice. The escort captain names it and smiles without humor. He wrote himself a roadblock, he says, and sets gunnery solutions like prayers. Voss looks at Saitama and Saitama looks at Voss. Neither say what both know. This is not the mirror yet. This is only the first stone on a road lined with them. The ship breathes. The convoy tightens like a fist without clenching. The prayers sink to a note that makes paint crack. He rolls his shoulder and lets the ache stop being a surprise. He feels Ida's deli back on a world that never existed in this universe and the smell of leaks and oil. And he lets that go because holding it will cost people he can see. He puts in its place a face of a boy with a tin saint and a chalk spiral and a mother's hand on her chest. He swivels his head and looks out a port at nothing seen. He does not smile. He does not frown. He breathes. The road to the throne has begun. The convoy climbs until Vigilus is a thumb smudge of fire and him. Engines write long, patient lines into the black. Escort ships hold station like hounds trained to silence. The hull's machine spirit whispers steel, psalms around the bones of men. Inside, the chapel glows low with votive lamps and a ship's slow heart. Sisters kneel in 2 rows, helms off, hair bound under white veils, voices braided into a hymn that keeps metal honest. Nulls stand at the pillars like shadows you do not notice until breath fogs around them. Saitama sits on the lower step, hands on knees, watching words rise and thin. A medica servitor tends him with oil and iron, the ritual for wounds that are not blood. Apply the balm, the priest murmurs, dipping 2 fingers in sanctified residue and tracing a spiral backward along the glove seam. Bind with nail, not with cloth. The nail touches leather and hums. The numb line warms, then steadies. He nods once, a filing sensation, as if shelving a tool. Voss and Seraphine stand in the side aisle under saints who are also ships. The Inquisitor's voice is pitched low, edged with tired arithmetic. Cost accumulates, she says. Each intervention pays into the enemy's clever tax. Doctrine cannot be a luxury, it's guardrail. Seraphine's reply is iron wrapped in linen. Doctrine without mercy is a wall that keeps the church warm and the world cold, she says. We are not accountants of pain. We are stewards of souls. He bleeds where we cannot bind. We must choose when to spend him. Voss's eyes do not soften. We spend him only where the ledger is entire worlds, she says. And we must be ready to close the book if the numbers go mad. Saitama listens with his head tilted, as if to a reign he will have to walk through anyway. He does not rise. The hymn finds a lower note and sits there like a hand on a back. They move from chapel to medici. Cots line obey pitched to slow gravity. Sister with shrapnel under her skin smiles with her teeth while a servo probes. A sailor grips a rosary made of nuts and bolts and whispers names of children. A null sits on a stool and watches dust drift and does not blink for a long time because blinking is wasted motion. Saitama holds a bandage roll for a nurse with steady hands and says nothing when a boy stares at his cape and tries not to cry. He takes the boy's count and turns it into a breath instead. The escort captain's voice rides the vox, dry as sun-cured rope. Translation shadow a 2-3 mark, he says. Silent, mass uncertain. Navigator's chant climbs and then steadies. The hull hums deeper. The starboard lumen lines flicker, not in failure but in indecision. Sound drops out of the corridor and comes back thin. A resourceful rating finds that the taste of tea turns to dust in his mouth and thinks of home so hard he forgets the word for it. The nulls stiffen without moving. Seraphine's gauntlet creaks once around a rosary link. A shape emerges ahead. Not a ship, not a drift rock, not a god, not anything that belongs to warmth. It is a plane held wrong, a dark that subtracts light rather than blocks it. Within, angles relax toward death. Every machine spirit aboard the convoy lowers its head and refuses to sing for 3 heartbeats. The hollow star arrives without ceremony. It does not glow. It does not roar. Its presence simplifies things in a way that makes breath unnecessary. Necron's stillness radiates out. Pariah dampers brush the convoy like frost on bone. Hope shrinks to tidy, manageable vectors. Voss says the word with a surgeon's hate. Catan shard. Seraphine's whisper is a prayer and a weapon. The dead god that eats variants, she breathes. They chained a piece of hunger and taught it boredom. Saitama stands and the numb line under his glove cools into clean ache. He feels a muscle in his chest go slack in a way that is not fatigue. He has known apathy as a room with no furniture. This makes the room the world. Every color steps back to grayscale and then starts to catalog itself out of existence. The hollow star does not speak. It offers a stillness that answers questions you've stopped asking. Its field turns choices into lines that do not meet. Crew blink at controls and find action arbitrary. The hymn in the chapel stutters, then searches for a note that will survive without wanting to. Saitama walks toward the hangar doors and the doors open because wanting to is not the mechanism here. The bay breathes out. He steps into the field and the field presses him flat into an idea. Nothing that has a shape deserves to be. He resists not with heat but with rhythm. In, hold, out, hold. The cadence does not care about color. It counts without numbers. It relieves nothing and refuses to stop. The hollow star tilts. Its pariah tide deepens, a low tide that never returns. A rating lets go of a spanner and watches it forget to drop. A candle burns down to a stub and does not flicker, because flicker is variance, and variance is sin. Saitama's shoulder softens under a weight he cannot point at. It intercepts him mid-void with a thought that has no edges and all edges. Become the still point and never be hungry again. The offer is the shape of his worst relief, a boredom with no ache, no fights, no need, just enough. He nearly sits. It is that close. He sees himself as a dot pressed flat on a graph, neat and titled, framed and filed. He tastes the comfort of ending questions. Seraphine steps into the hangar shadow and slams a gauntlet against the bulkhead. Live, she orders the ship, loud as a law. Her voice cracks. The hull replies with a groan. Paint flakes, bolts sing. The chapel finds the low note again. Nulls lean their emptiness into the tide and give it back to the source like a debt refused. Voss throws iron into the air. Nails thunk into a threshold line, a quick litany hammered into a seam. A choir adept opens her mouth and screams without sound. Tears run, and she keeps the scream's shape as if she were holding a door. Saitama's heel finds footing on a promise he invented earlier, and has to invent again. A boy with a tin saint, a spiral chalked around a bed, a woman's hand keeping a chest's stubborn rise. He remembers he is a hero, not because he loves the word, but because the job remains when love sleeps. He stands. The hollow star pivots. It re-aims stillness. It notices hunger in him and asserts that it can fill it by removing shape from appetite, making desire identical to absence. Its field kisses the cut under his glove, and the numb line becomes an incision, neat and necessary. He breathes once and lets the ache exist. He refuses to file it under relief. He does not punch. He pushes. He sets his palm against the field, the way you set a palm against pond ice to measure thickness. The pariah tide accepts his hand and concludes it must be a constant. He slides, adjusts pressure, finds the angle where constant refuses to be a constant. The place where stillness admits it is a state produced, not a truth. He leans. The hollow star moves half a degree without meaning to. The corridor lights flicker in gratitude and return to steady dim. Nulls step forward like doors slamming shut. Their emptiness becomes a channel rather than a lake. They frame the shard's field, shaping it rather than drowning in it. Seraphine's hymn refines harmony. It is not pretty. It is functional. The shard drops its mask of absence and reveals the edge behind it. Entropy wielded with taste. It unknits a gravity plate without heat or shock. People float a hand's width and then settle, all motions becoming the same non-motion. The escort captain speaks a command in a tone that has no alternative. Gunners breathe in unison and lock firing solutions. Lances cycle without glow. They are ready to work if work will be allowed. Saitama takes one more step into the tide and feels layers of himself simplify. He keeps one, a promise to carry people who cannot carry themselves. He keeps two, a rule about monsters and men. He keeps three, breath cadence, because cadence belongs to anyone and cannot be taxed. The shard notices and shapes a mirror. It shows him a life where he accepted this calm, and all roads ended at a spot of clean floor. He looks at the neatness, and he is tired enough to want it. He is honest enough to admit it. He looks past the mirror at the convoy. He sees Seraphine's chapped lips around a vow. He sees a Voss's eyes bright like knives dragged over river stones. He sees a rating's hand shaking and not dropping the spanner after all. He sets his shoulder against stillness and intends to make a dent. The hull hum drops to a subsonic that rattles teeth. Then something else speaks. It is not a voice. It is a golden direction like a line drawn through fog with a blade. The Astronomicon flares, not brighter but nearer. Every machine spirit aboard feels seen and stands taller. Every navigator's third eye weeps brief, clean pain and turns to point. The speaks without words says, "Reach the throne." Saitama feels the line pass through him the way a kite string passes through hands and tugs. The hollow star feels it too. It recognizes a sovereign claim on path, a mandate that is not a question. Its field does not want to apply here. It withdraws a sliver, surprised to find surprise. Seraphine barks the order like a seal on a writ. Full burn on the golden line. The escort captain roars aye like a prayer. Lenses dilate. Plasma hums. The convoy leans into a trajectory that exists because the Emperor wills it to be a road. The hollow star considers and calculates. It moves to intercept and finds a region of space suddenly full of things it did not account for. Quiet women without voices walking in step along the golden line with blades sheathed. Their presence a shearing plane. Sisters of silence ride a black ship in high guard, masks carved like calm. Their null saturates the path with a quality the shard cannot digest. Variance becomes duty. Duty becomes heatless armor. The shard slides aside. Stillness licks hull, then loses purchase. It waits, cold and patient, on the edge of path to try again where the line thins. It does not chase into a sovereign corridor. It is not stupid. It is eternal and can wait. Saitama lets the ache settle back into a line. He stands down by degrees, each degree a choice. Voss pulls a nail from the threshold with her teeth and pockets it like proof. Seraphine slumps against the bulkhead and laughs once, sharp. The hymn drops into quiet. Crew find tea, tastes like tea again. He watches the dark plane recede and does not make the mistake of thinking victory. He names it not ending yet and accepts it. The convoy rides the golden line into a system guarded by rings of fortresses and faith. Macro bastions hold stations like iron thrones in the black. Vox altars thrum in bands. The nearer they come, the less choice feels like a private activity, and the more it feels like a public office. Terra rises slow and final. It is not beautiful. It is victorious. A cracked jewel crusted in city and shrine, wreathed in the smoke of a species that refused death long enough to call endurance a culture. The Imperial Palace is not a building. It is a continent of answers layered into mountain and machine. The sky over it is a law. Custodian warships drift like lions that learn patience. Their prows wear aquillas you feel more than see. Black ships idle with sisters of silence lined along decks, as if the void itself needs policing. The phalanx is elsewhere, but one of its cousins, an ancient bastion platform, casts a shadow that makes ships adjust their self-respect. They receive a code that does not permit reply. The convoy falls into a procession with nothing to do but be in it. Escort ships peel and bow away. The pilgrim lane opens through orbital plate and shield and gate. The Emperor's highway is a corridor of pressure that says, here, this way, and nowhere else. They enter atmosphere inside permissions. Skyline splits around them into spires dressed in gold and scar tissue. Cathedral megastructures knit valleys into nave and transept. Processional roads are broad and bounded by statues that look like men who killed gods and then put their weapons down because there was nothing left to lift. They land in a cradle lined with banners hung long enough to learn stillness. Custodes stand at perimeter with spears that have never needed to prove their purpose. Their armor does not shine, it asserts. Sisters of silence flank the entry in ranks, their emptiness like cool hands on a fevered brow. Even Saitama's ache eases in their shadow. Then it twinges, honest about not belonging here. The ramp lowers. Air like parchment and lit oil washes up. People kneel. No one tells them to. Saitama walks between gold and quiet. Nulls pace with him, their lids half lowered. Their presence rubs his cut raw, then numb, then raw again. He accepts it as the price of walking where danger is framed rather than slain. Voss steps at his shoulder, rosette knot displayed. Seraphine holds her helm under her arm and keeps her sword at rest. Skitarii lower their guns. Augur halos glow like halos should. They pass under gates that had names before any had tongues to say them. They enter courtyards where you could fit cities and not be noticed by the statues. A hall of petitioners swallows them. It is full of silence that is not empty. Voices have lived here and died here, and their echoes have been taught not to linger. Custodes do not speak because words are waste. Their eyes do enough. Sisters of silence watch without watching. They wait. Waiting here is an act. It feels like holding a shield. A door opens that is not a door. It is a decision. They step through it and into a chamber without scale. Ceiling and floor and distance decide not to argue about definitions. In the far heart of the world, the throne burns. A choir the size of navy fleets hums a line of light through the soul of the species to keep it pointed. They do not enter that. No one does. They enter a resonance thrown from that. It is enough to empty and fill a man twice in one step. The audience is silent and not. Saitama stands and the numb line in his hand wakes like a wire under storm. He's without hunger here, and he does not trust that. He resists the peace the way a sailor resists a tune that wants him to step off into waves. He does not see a face. He sees a judgment that feels like sunlight, through stained glass that has seen siege and wedding both. It looks at him without eyes. He feels himself summarized with accuracy and mercy in the same glance. The look does not flatter. It does not patronize. It places him on the map and does not ask permission. Voss feels her knees weaken and does not take the disrespect of kneeling by a reflex. She chooses to stand and then to bow because choosing is everything here. Seraphine's lips move around words she has said since she had milk teeth. The sisters' nulls dip, then rise, an acknowledgement rather than deference. Words are not used. Saitama understands anyway. The war is right and wrong at once. Mercy can save and doom. Strength can protect and rule. He is not asked to be perfect. He is asked to be exact and bound. He is offered 3 paths as images that weigh. Go home through the seam he broke and forget this whole war until it echoes as a dream. Walk free, sanctioned only by his own name, and let factions tear themselves around him like tides around a lump of rock. Take a writ and a leash, become hand and claws, maximize good, and accept chains measured in laws. The exchange is also a mirror. It shows him the life he has lived and asks if this was duty or habit. It asks without malice. It will accept either answer and make use of both. Saitama looks at his fist without looking down. He sees the line and the cost. He sees the city's face looking up at him from smoke and railings. He sees the hollow star waiting where the path thins, and Azrakar writing questions where streets should be. He sees his boredom like an old coat that kept him alive through too much rain and kept him cold in summer. He looks at Voss and Seraphine without turning his head. He chooses nothing yet, because choice here is a vow with a mouth. A golden presence presses like a hand on a sternum that has forgotten how to be brave without rage. It blesses nothing. It permits. It warns. He understands limits as instructions on a tool. Power scaling interlude. 2. Under mandate, his precise strikes must be bracketed by sanctioned countersigns. Iron, prayer, null presence. Or their resonance escalates warp ingress. Unbracketed blows are restricted to existential threats with pre-cleared corridors. Gentle vectoring remains permitted, but siphons energy to lattice wielders if civic habits are hexed. He must break habits in population while acting. Prior exposure stabilizes his conceptual cut, numbing it, but prolonged saturation threatens erosion of motive. Medicii chapel cycles are required to retemper intent. Mimetic null and anti-energy attacks now imprint deeper. Overuse without liturgical buffers will scar operating capacity. Navigational operations within astronomical corridors damp enemy metaphysical leverage and must frame engagements when possible. The presence withdraws not in distance but in pressure. He is left with three paths not as art but as doors. Custodies turn without commentary. Sisters move as water between banks. An equerry in robes that have known one man's service for longer than history gestures toward a side abs with a nod that means breathe, decide, be ready to carry the price of whichever. Voss lets out air she did not measure. We have audience, she says, voice singed but unbroken. We have rules. Seraphine touches the hilt to her brow. We have a road and 2 ditches, she says. Choose the road. Saitama stands before a chamber where a species keeps itself pointed toward tomorrow by burning today to ash 1 heartbeat at a time. He has never respected anything enough to wish to be part of it. He respects this. Respect feels like a stone in the hand, weighty, simple, useful if thrown properly, better if kept. He turns from the silent audience, cut steady, breath measured, hunger acknowledged without being obeyed. The golden line that brought them in hums under the floor like a prayer said by iron. Somewhere outside, the hollow star leans on the edge of permission. Somewhere far, Azrakar writes a scratch across a map and thinks about how to turn holding into a trap. They will ask his answer. He will give it with the shape of his next steps. For now, he walks out into pageantry that means something. Banners that are promises that cost. Spears that are questions with points. Silence that honors more than it hides. He does not smile. He does not frown. He breathes. In, hold, out, hold. Recap. He walked out from the throne's nearness carrying 3 doors in his chest. Return. Free agent. Writ. The palace air tastes like old oil and incense. Pageantry waits without blinking. The first door opens like a memory. A lightless corridor lined with grocery aisles and quiet weather. A seam punched home. A bed that never asks. Mornings that produce nothing but intactness. Faces blur. Names become hints. Vigilus shrinks to a rumor. He would wake one day and think, there was a city with green light, and by evening it would be a dream scrap in a laundry pocket. He could be content. The price would be the lives he could have lifted. The second door is a road with no shoulders. He sees himself dropping into war zones like rain that is also judgment. Governments writing laws against the sky and cults writing prayers around his footfalls. Chapters pledge and hate in equal measure. He saves a world and triggers a schism 3 sectors wide. Children grow up learning that help is a force you beg for or barricade against. He remains free. Everyone else pays for how free. The third door is a table with a chain coiled on it and a pen heavy with other people's decisions. Sanction, not ownership. A leash that is also a lifeline. Bound strikes only. Audits. Corridors framed with iron and hymn. Mercy for baseline humanity unless mercy becomes murder by delay. He sees himself standing in rooms full of law and saying, I agree, and then walking out to pay for that agreement with blood that does not leave puddles. He stands very still. Pride is loud. Duty is quiet. He thinks about a boy counting and then breathing, a mother's hand, a sister's cracked voice, an inquisitor's jaw set because numbers are knives and she must cut. He considers the ache under his glove as a teacher instead of a debt collector. He turns toward the third door. The choice happens without theatrics. A custodian, with a face like a carved admonition, inclines his head by a degree. A robed equerry sets a slate on a lectern. Its text writes as if ink has waited for this hand. Voss reads it in one pass, lips thin. Seraphine makes the sign of the Aquila and then lays her fingers on the slate, as if she were touching a relic and a contract at once. He steps forward. He places his gloved palm on a seal that is not wax. It is pressure and permission. Something unseen threads the seam of his glove with iron filament spirals. His cape's plain hem takes on weight. Within the cloth, a woven sigil appears, an aquila reduced to 2 clean strokes braced around a small spiral. Less a crest than a claws. No halo, no crown. A little lore stitched where wind can read it. Voss's voice is formal and unkind only to ambiguity. Mandate of conditional agency, she recites aloud for the room. Witnessed under the Palatine Tower. Signed by eye and breath before the Golden Throne's knowledge. Her gaze hooks him, not to bind, but to make sure this is not sleep. Boundaries. You are authorized to engage by force only inside Astronomican framed corridors, or within improvised brackets of iron, prayer, and null presence, arrayed by an imperial authority on scene. Add it, he says, voice even. Authority can be a medic with a whistle if the roof is falling. Authority is the adult in the room, she replies dry. I accept medic with whistle if the roof is falling. She continues. You will prioritize carryover cut. You will not kill baseline humans except in direct triage of active or witnessed demonic manifestation that threatens mass casualty within seconds. And even then, mercy is the last measure. Every strike must be buffered by countersign. Unbracketed punches, only when the alternative is an extermination-level event. Seraphine's voice, iron and linen. You will pray when called to, even if you only breathe. You will attend medici and chapel cycles. You will let us hold you when the cut turns mean. You will kneel when commanded and run when told, and you will not break your leash to enjoy a fight. He nods once. He names his answer without dressing it. I accept. Voss slides a small rosette, not hers, not full inquisitorial seal, a travelling writ, into a pouch on his belt. It is not for show. It is a key that opens exactly 3 doors, to null kits, to iron, to sister's time. Clause of recall, she says. If your strikes ring beyond bracket, if choir distress exceeds liturgical thresholds, if null saturation erodes your motive, the Deptus Custodes or the Ordo Malleus may interdict you. You will obey. I will obey. He breathes once. It trembles and stops trembling. The chamber's pressure eases as if a finger lifts from a chest. The 3 doors close behind his ribs and become one path under his feet. The silence that follows is not approval. It is an agreement to keep letting him try while other men and women pay to keep the lights on. They step back through marble meant to feel like bone and into a courtyard full of the quiet. That follows a hard argument where both sides agreed on the price and no one smiled about it. Sisters of silence incline their heads by a measure. A custodian shifts his spear a thumb's width, which is an accolade. Skitari lower augur halos. A bronze gong sounds once somewhere, not celebratory, a bell of record. They do not linger. You do not camp in a verdict hall. They walk back to the cradle, where their small ship waits amid lions. Voss tucks the writ away, as if it might burn through cloth. Seraphine fastens her helm. Nulls bare their faceless bows and make space feel safe by hurting it. They launch into the sovereign corridor under banners of law. The golden line hums. The convoy agrees with itself about what happens next. Reach Vigilus. Cut the last keystone. Hunt the writer before his questions turn the city into a catechism that ends in knives. The hollow star waits where permission thins. It's patient. It learned something last time, and patience is how hunger ages into doctrine. It slides in shallow, bringing a new angle. Not stillness now, but tidy charity. It offers to keep the corridor clean if everyone stops being complicated. Its field folds choices into neat rows. He feels the ache drift toward cool acceptance again. He lets it brush, then calls the claws into his body. Bracket, him, iron, null. He speaks aloud into the hangar, to himself and the men, whose hands shake around straps. In, hold, out, hold. Seraphine lays a palm to helm, takes the claws into her lungs, and orders across the decks. Cadence by writ. Him adjusts down to the legal pitch. Nulls array like thorns. Iron nails go into thresholds. The field hits a road it cannot own. The shard circles, fails to find a page to write on, and folds back. It learns too. It will come again where there is no chorus and less law. Not today. The convoy tips across the system lip and out into ugly stars. Ahead, where the gauntlet gapes, a new geometry flowers. Azrakar throws a net across the corridor. 3 mobile keystones circling like wolves. Each is a shrine wreck strapped to a blackstone heart, pariah kites hanging on wires, bells tuned to counting habits stolen from a city's fright. Varro's voice is not present, but the habits he taught the fleet are. The escorts that remain triangulate like men who were raised on bright line doctrine. The Grey Knights are far, hunting other questions. The day is theirs to solve, or to let ruin solve them. Voss closes her eyes for a heartbeat, and opens them with decision in them. We cut the 2 outer keystones with lance and null. Then he will try to fuse the 3rd into the corridor's skin. That's your strike, she says to him. Brackets in place. If you ring beyond the frame, we abort, even if it costs the city. He does not argue. He has a leash because he asked for one. They move like a liturgy practiced sober. Skitari pour vector fire into pariah kites, sewing holes into neatness. Sisters place lines of hymn across vacuum on vox band. The words are weighted to stay put. Nulls ride drop pods, like stones falling through a clean lake. Their emptiness reaches out and unthreads cones. 2 keystones, dim. A 3rd flares, angry, and rams itself into the corridor's edge, trying to become part of law. Azrakar speaks in the spaces between words, voice thin but sharp as a quill tip. I have learned your holding, he says to Saitama. Now I will make it a prison. I will make you orderly. He meets the keystone at the seam, where corridor and wrongness negotiate jurisdiction. The bracket is tight. 2 nulls on his flanks like quiet witnesses. Sisters vox him keyed to the Emperor's name with no syllables he will be permitted to count. Iron spiral chalked on his glove by a Medici who has never been this far from ground and is ashamed of how steady her hand was. He sets his feet on nothing. He breathes the cadence. He looks not at the keystone but at the sentence it is trying to write into the corridor. Hold stop. He answers with a different verb. He throws one punch. It is bracketed, small, exact. It lands on the equal sign and converts it to a colon. Hold. And then he fills the space with people, faces, breath, particulars, by the power of every witness still alive inside his head. The resonance tries to sing. The bracket swallows the first verse and leaves only a thud the choir can absorb without going blind. The keystone splits along a spiral seam. Blackstone tries to sulk and cannot. The corridor keeps his law. Azrakar's net droops. The bells clang out of tune and then crack. The writer feels the loss in his teeth. He steps out of an equation and into view on a ruined frigate laced to the net by hungry cables. He is thinner. His cloak writes slower. He still smiles because questions often smile when answers disrespect them. Stipulated, he says. You found grammar. Now show me conviction. He spins filaments like a patient spider and threads them through civilian feeds, counting hymns, tally boards, triage metrics. If the city breathes wrong, his lattice drinks. He means to drown Saitama in the mercy clause, to make every gentle act tied to the noose. Voss sees it in the flood of data. She hates how elegant it is. He's taxing kindness, she says. He's found a way to turn help into heat. Saitama draws a breath. Then we change the habit again. He leaves the keystone's dying light and drops toward the comm layer with the city's voice. His cape snaps like nothing dramatic. He lands in the heart of a Vox farm tier and looks at a wall of numbers. There is no time for education campaigns. There is one wide channel. He picks up the mic because someone puts it in his hand. He does not say his name. He does not call down a miracle. He speaks the 4 notes the city learned under fire. In, he says, quiet as law. Hold, out, hold. 4 beats of air bleed across the hive, into habs, into triage tents, into gunnery pits. Priests radio the pulse into loud hailers. Medici tap it on metal. Children teach it back to parents. The count collapses into a breath. The lattice's siphon dries. Azrakar watches a pricing mechanism fail because a man talked about breathing. He bares his teeth. He does not get angrier. He gets exact. He draws a pariah filament long and fine and threads it through the corridor straight for Saitama's shoulder. It loves the cut under the glove. It sings as it approaches, not sound but neatness. He lets it touch. The numb line flares white and then settles to cold. He accepts the pain because the bracket is ready. Seraphine's hymn widens. Nulls lean. The filament knots where iron makes art out of law. It frays. It withdraws with a confused twitch. Azrakar steps back through math and into a safe gap. He learned the leash and writes around it. He will not let himself be punched again with the brackets just so. He needs a new angle, and he finds it where dignity lives. He pulls the hollow star in like a black bead on a wire, not deep, just enough that its neat charity brushes the city's edge. It offers to clean the mess, if only the mess stops trying. Entropy comes kindly. The corridor remembers being a path and tries to become a hallway. Saitama feels the room choose neatness. He knows the taste now. He carries the claws in his bones. He answers with breath and with a look to Voss. She nods once, austere as iron. Claws of Mercy stands. She transmits on command band. Hold breath, not numbers. Carry, don't cut. Inquisitorial writ authorizes the one punch if and when the keystone becomes a blade at the city's throat. Seraphine hears it and lifts her sword in a place where no one can see and says 3 words. We will hold. She means the people, the line, and him. He climbs nothing to reach the seam where shard and writer's net almost touch. The hollow star opens absence like a hand about to close. He does not let it. He sets his palm to the space between. His fingers know the angle where constant becomes produced state, and he leans like a man shouldering a door that wants to shut on a child's foot. Azrakar threads a last filament, this one dressed like an equal opponent. The vision he used on the roof, more convincing, wearing weight that feels like relief. It says, finally again, and this time it is almost true. He exhales. On the hold he remembers the claws. On the out he remembers the boy laughing at the spiral. On the last hold he remembers saying no without anger. He lets the filament touch and not pass. He looks past it at the hand holding it. He throws his sanctioned punch, bracketed by null and him and iron, inside the corridor's law, in direct reply to an existential blade. One precise, deliberate strike at the joint where writer and mirror neatness try to agree that people are mistakes to be corrected. The blow is not loud. It is final. It lands where Azrakar's will crosses the shard's tidy doctrine. The lattice drops like a scaffold kicked out from under a gallows. The shard shears away, denied jurisdiction by a gold line that asserts its own map. The bells stop. The pariah kites tumble and die like locusts meeting frost. The corridor holds, not as a halt, but as a road. Azrakar staggers as if the world has refused to end the way he preferred. His cloak unthreads. His ship's hungry cables go slack. For the first time, his eyes show anger that is not aesthetic. He tries to write himself a door, and his quill catches. He fades like a word being erased with a dirty sleeve. He is not dead. He is not here. The hollow star turns its plane toward the surviving stray keystone and considers making a lesson of pity. It cannot get purchase. Sisters of silence in the black ship along the line simply stand and let their absence be an order that nothing can disobey. The shard slides back to wait another day in a place with fewer hands. Choirs groan, sag, and do not break. The numb line under his glove cools to hurt that is honest. The city's Vox farm counts nothing and gets more done. The corridor breathes like a chest that survived surgery. He turns to Voss across bands. Is the price paid? Paid and receipted, she answers, voice hoarse. We lost no more choir than a bad hour. Brackets held. Good. She swallows. Good. Seraphine speaks to him both as soldier and sister. You obeyed, she says. You still chose. That is the shape of courage in an empire. He does not answer because his mouth is busy being a person and breathing. He looks down. Vigilus lifts its wrecked face toward orbit and does not look like a miracle. It looks like a city that needs lunch and water and laughter and time. He likes it better that way. The convoy descends not as saviors, but as men and women who brought a law down to a place that deserved one that was kinder than gravity. They land in smoke washed clean by rain that no one ordered. People gather. No one kneels. They do not have to. He steps onto an artery, and the street accepts him without needing permission to be relieved. Voss reads the writ aloud to the city, not because they asked, but because law works better when heard. Her voice is tired. By mandate, she says. This agent is bound to carry first, to strike bracketed, to submit to audits, to obey recall. Mercy is his clause and yours. Do not make him a bell. Do not make him an idol. Breathe. Seraphine raises her sword and lowers it. Ritual is done. Work is left. Nulls move behind both like a tide without salt. They do not bow. They do not need to. Their existence is their witness. He kneels without being told because there is a boy at rail height holding up a tin saint and a spiral drawn on a scrap of pallet wood. The boy whispers, I learned the song. He taps the rhythm on his own chest. In, hold, out, hold. Saitama taps it back. Azrakar's absence is not peace. It is space in which new questions can be asked, some of them smart, some of them knives. Word-bearers send new scripture into alleys. A heretic vows to rebuild a lattice out of fear of breathing. She will die after making it halfway clever, and it will kill 30 and save 3,000 by teaching their neighbors not to count in crises. A Necron lord somewhere calculates the loss of a shard and smiles the way glaciers do. In the segmentum, a Black Templar chaplain hears rumor of a sanctioned weapon with a leash and grinds a rosary until beads crack. In the Scholastia Psychona, a teacher writes, breathe, not count, on a chalkboard, and feels wrong and right at once. The Emperor does not speak. He does not need to. The corridor lines hold where they must. The throne's heat is the same as it was yesterday. He lives in the lines between clauses. Days pour themselves into habit. He goes where the writ sends him. A Promethean rig, where a demon of bureaucracy eats schedules. A pilgrim road, where men with knives have learned to copy him just enough to pass. A manufactorum floor, where a small god of pressure wants to turn regrets into gears. He carries first, always. He punches when he must, small and bracketed. He goes to chapel and to Medici. He lets Seraphine look him in the face and say if the cut in him is looking like a wound or a scar that's behaving. He learns to love audits for the sensation of being seen and adjusted in time. Voss writes reports terse enough to cut cheese, and when they are done, she sits across from him with tea that tastes like tea and tells him who lived, who didn't, what changed because he chose not to be a storm. He breaks 3 small chains of counting in 3 different towns with the same 4-word instruction. In one, a woman adds a 5th word, together. The hex can do nothing with that. It is badly designed for fellowship. Sometimes he stands on a roof and hears the wound in the sky whine for his knuckles. He refuses it. Sometimes it is quiet, and he goes down the stairs anyway, because quiet is what predators like. He meets Hollow Star again on a mining corridor, where a low hum pretends to be law. He brackets and leans and sets it aside like a book before bed. He meets questions written by smaller men than Azrakar and refuses to grade them on a curve. He dreams once of returning to a room where onions and leeks made a smell and the ceiling was a ceiling and boredom was not a sin. He wakes and breathes the cadence and feels the ache under his glove settle into the same truth. He smiles without showing teeth. He walks to the hangar and goes where the writ says, try. He never says champion. He never accepts it when others do. He answers to Saitama and to Miracle One and to hey and to please and to sir from a man older than him who doesn't care if he is a god or a tool so long as the hospital keeps its roof. One afternoon on Vigilus, a fresco goes up in a transit hall. It is badly painted but patient. It shows a plain cape's hem with a small spiral stitched into it, an aquila looking more like a bracket than a bird. Below, children chalk spirals around their feet and hop between them, while a null watches with the affection of a shadow for a sun. Night falls where night can still fall. A wind with solder and incense in it moves along a street that holds. The boy with the tin saint lies on a pallet bed. He breathes, in, hold, out, hold. His mother puts her hand on his chest and feels the shape of a promise made by strangers and enforced by friends. He walks past their window without looking in because the writ taught him about privacy. He stops at the corner and skims a finger along a new iron nail in a shrine door frame. It hums. He looks at his hand. The seam glints where the iron filament was threaded. The line aches honest and then rests. This will be with him. So will choices. So will the leash he asked for, owned, and wears without shame. He breathes, in, hold, out, hold. The sky is not healed. The city is not saved. Neither is lost. He walks.